Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I'm Jason Eternity Inman.
I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson, and welcome to your Mind University because you have stumbled through the multiverse, through time and space, onto the podcast where we take one character, construct, or weird alien race from popular culture and teach you everything you need to know about it in about an hour. And Jason, today we're doing what again?
We're talking about the Time Lords because Doctor Who is back in our lives. Season 10 has begun. So I thought let's break down the history of the aliens that the Doctor hails from. Now, so many people have requested, of course, like, do the 4th Doctor, do the 10th Doctor, do the 12th Doctor. But the problem with that is the same thing as like when somebody were to request Indiana Jones. There's only so much you can talk about, really, because we like to explore, we like to open up new avenues. And if we're just telling you what you can just watch in a TV show or what you can just watch in 3 movies, I don't feel there's much of a value to it. But with the Time Lords, if we compact and put everything that they've said about the Time Lords over the years, then I think it becomes kind of fascinating.
That's hundreds of episodes, that's books, that's comics. There's a lot to the Time Lords.
Well, we're not dropping into the books and the comics because the books and the comics are not canon. So we're only sticking to the TV show and what they've said about the Time Lords. So let's jump into the first section of our podcast, the 10-cent origin.
And the 10-cent origin is, of course, the part of the podcast where Jason is going to give you all of the footnotes that you need to know about the Time Lords in case you go to a sick cocktail party right outside Gallifreyan and somebody asks you what you know about them.
Now, the Time Lords first appeared in the Doctor Who episode An Unearthly Child, which, of course, was the very first Doctor Who episode of all time.
The pilot.
The Doctor is a Time Lord. That's the first appearance of the Time Lords. It was in November 23 in 1963. Now, the Time Lords have also been called the Lord of Time, the Time Ladies, the Chrono Arcs. They've been called Watchmakers, and they also have like sort of a species name, which is called Dominus Temporis. Their bases have been the planets of Gallifrey and Jewel. Jewel is a planet that in some stories they have said the Gallifreyans, the Time Lords, have been based there. It's kind of been ignored now, so don't worry about it. Gallifrey. And they have been led by the leader, Lord President, who usually in most adventures is a guy named Rassilon.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to take a quick break here and thank one of our lovely sponsors. All right, super friends, you know I have a beard, but I still have to trim the edges of it, make it nice and snappy. Well, that's why I'm so excited for our new sponsor, Dollar Shave Club. They deliver a great shave at a great price, conveniently delivered right to your door. And I've been big fans of their videos and razors for years. And guess what? They sent me a box. It had their executive razor and a tube of Dr. Carver's shave cream. And I gotta tell you, that shave cream is amazing. Now, part of the reason why I grow a beard is because I hate shaving, but the executive razor and the shave cream made it one of the smoothest shaves I've ever had. Plus, you don't even have to use that much cream. I may go clean shaven more often because of this. So I want you to make the smarter and smoother choice, just like me, by joining Dollar Shave Club. For a limited time, new members get their first month of the executive razor with a tube of Dr. Carver's shave butter for only $5 with free shipping. And after that, razors are just a few bucks a month. In your first month box, you get an awesome weighty handle, a full cassette of 4 cartridges, and a tube of their shave butter. After your first month, replacement cartridges are going to ship automatically at their regular price. Now, there are no hidden fees, no commitments, and you can cancel anytime you like. So join the club today at dollarshaveclub.com/lesson. That's dollarshaveclub.com/lesson. Help the podcast out and get yourself a decent shave.
Now on to the Meet Cute.
The Meet Cute is the part of the podcast that we stole from romantic comedy writing, where we tell you the first time we meeted these characters and how cute it was.
Now, Ashley, it's a little awkward to ask you when you first meted and cuted the Time Lords because sometimes the Time Lords are around, sometimes they're not. It's very, subjective, I guess. I want to ask you, what was your first episode of Doctor Who that you ever watched? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that. I was in university when David Tennant was the Doctor. And a couple people I knew watched Doctor Who. I feel like it was a bigger deal in Canada before it was in America just because of the tie to English culture.
The Commonwealth?
Yeah, a little stronger. And a couple of my roommates were watching Doctor Who, and they invited me to watch an episode with them. And I was like, okay, I guess I don't really want to watch this. And we watched, I don't know what the episode is called, and I've never revisited it because I still maintain to this day that it's terrible. It's a 9th Doctor episode, so that's Christopher Eccleston, and they go to this planet, and like there's a lady, and her face is all stretched out, and she's like, moisturize me.
I believe that's the 2nd episode of the new series of Doctor Who.
That episode sucks.
Are they standing around watching the sun? They're
yes,
yeah. It's the 2nd episode.
That episode sucks. Everything about it is terrible. It tells you nothing. It's dumb. So I didn't watch Doctor Who for a really long time because I was like, this guy's not the Doctor. I don't know who this annoying girl is. What is this dumb alien? It looks really cheap. And then I saw many moons later a commercial for Matt Smith. And I thought that he looked not dumb. So then I started watching his episodes. And that, for me, was a much better gateway because they actually, like, explained the constructs of Doctor Who to you. And because that's also the season where they got a big budget boost. So it looks a lot better. So really, my first episode was the 11th hour. But if we're going in chronological order, it was whatever that episode with the Moisturize Me lady is called.
Nice.
So how about you? What did you first encounter Doctor Who?
My very first episode of Doctor Who that I ever watched all the way through is the 11th hour.
Correct.
Now, I think I saw like various ones here and there, but yeah, it never impressed me. And the thing that made me watch Doctor Who was I used to drive for a job I had a couple years ago through Venice, California. And when I would, there was a billboard for the 6th season of the new series. And it was like, trust your doctor. And it was a picture of Matt Smith from behind. And it was like dark and it was in the desert. And the only light in the picture was the green from his sonic screwdriver.
I know exactly what the poster is.
And I loved that picture. I thought that picture was so striking. I was like, oh, wow, that looks cool. I'm going to go check out what this is. But I decided that I couldn't start in the 6th season, so I backtracked to the 5th season. I remember watching the 11th hour and being like, why have I never watched this show? And then I started backtracking. And I started backtracking to the David Tennant era. I backtracked to the Christopher Eccleston era. And then I backtracked and watched a whole bunch of the classic Doctor Who's that like people said were like the great episodes. So like I've absorbed a lot of Doctor Who over the last 5 years would be my thing. So that's where I first met the Time Lords of the Doctor.
Nice.
And I'm sure we've mentioned this on the podcast because a couple years ago we did like a month of Doctor Who. But you know, it's nice since we've had a Doctor Who break to bring this back up.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, and what else are we going to do for the 10-cent origin?
That's right.
Meet cute then.
All right, let's move into History 101.
And History 101 is the main meat of the lesson where Professor Jason is going to throw down everything we need to know about the Time Lords.
Now, I'm going to tell you this lesson in a different order because I want everybody out there to be experts on the Time Lords. And then after that, I'm going to tell you a little bit of the history of the Time Lords because there's not much to the history of the Time Lords because it's just kind of the history of the Doctor. And that lesson would be 9 hours. Well, no, actually, it'd be 12 hours long. No, actually, it'd probably be like 24 hours long. It'd be a long lesson. And I don't want to do the history of the Doctor. We could eventually do history of certain Doctors, I think. But we're talking about the Time Lords. And the main Time Lord we always see is the Doctor. So we're not going to do that exactly.
Okay.
So, but first off, just in case anybody out there has never ever watched Doctor Who, Ashley, would you mind giving a brief history of what Doctor Who is?
Doctor Who is a show about a character called the Doctor who's usually played by a man who is a Time Lord, which means that he's from a race that is responsible for policing and protecting all of space and time. He's a bad one. So he stole a TARDIS, which is basically a spaceship that's can morph into whatever it wants, but his is broken to look like a police box. It's the blue thing that you always see in the poster. It's bigger on the inside. So he travels through space and time and does whatever he wants instead of protecting it. And per the rules that were arbitrarily made up in the 60s, he gets 12 regenerations.
We'll get into that. You don't have to talk about that specifically.
Okay, but so every time he dies for 12 times, except for when stuff happens, he can come back to life with a different face, different body.
Yep.
Is that good enough?
That's pretty much. I just basically wanted to give a brief overview, just in case there's somebody out there to be like, well, I've never ever watch Doctor Who.
This lesson's not going to help you.
Yeah. No,
You
yeah.
should go watch the 11th hour.
All right, so let's get into some production facts real quick about the Time Lords before we actually get into the fictional timeline of the Doctor.
Cool.
Time Lords. See? The Doctor invades everything. All right, here we go. Now, early on in the series, the first Doctor was identified as a human being. Mm-hmm. And however, his home planet, which from the start of the series is explicitly established as not being Earth. So he was established as a human who was from somewhere not Earth. Mm-hmm. Okay. In the War Games episode, this was a Second Doctor episode in 1969, the Doctor's people appeared, who from then on are known as a race called the Time Lords. And in Spearhead from Space in 1970, the Doctor's earlier description of himself as a human is retconned when, in that episode, it's the third Doctor, he explicitly states that he is not human for the first time in the series. And in the Time Warrior, the name of the Doctor's home planet, Gallifrey, was set on screen for the very first time.
Aww.
Now, the nature and history of the Time Lords, of course, is kind of been gradually revealed as the television program has progressed. Now, you out there might think the Time Lords and humans are very similar. They are not. They are not similar at all. Even though they look exactly the same, just like Clark Kent, they don't. Don't worry about it. Physiological differences, from humans include two hearts, of course, which normally beat at 170 beats per minute.
Which if human hearts beat at 170 beats per minute, you'd be super dead.
It's like you're running at like 35 miles per hour constantly.
Yeah.
They have an internal body temperature of 15 degrees Celsius, which is 59 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, really? That's low.
And they have a respiratory bypass system that allows them to survive strangulation.
Wow.
If severely injured, Time Lords can go into a healing coma, which lowers their body temperature to below freezing. And in the serial Destiny of the Daleks, Romana, who is a Time Lady companion to the Fourth Doctor, she was able to voluntarily stop both of her hearts from beating to fool the Daleks into believing that she was dead. And the Doctor also shows a greater tolerance to cold compared to humans, and specifically the Seeds of Doom and the Planet of Ood. Like, the cold does not bother him. Mm-hmm. In The End of Time, which was the final episode of the 10th Doctor, Time Lords are shown as being capable of surviving for a short period a massive burst of radiation that would have killed anything else, including humans, instantly. However, the radiation burst eventually did cause enough damage to start a regeneration cycle. We'll get into what that is in a second. Now, Time Lords are extremely long-lived, routinely counting their ages in terms of centuries. Now, the Second Doctor claimed in War Games that Time Lords could live practically forever, barring accidents. And the series that suggested that Time Lords have a different concept of aging from humans, like I said. Like, they don't really see aging the same way we do.
Well, especially if you age the way the Doctor ages and you go from looking like an old man to looking like 26-year-old Matt Smith.
Exactly. In Pyramid of Mars, the Fourth Doctor considers an age of 750 to be middle-aged. And in The Stolen Earth, the 10th Doctor refers to his original incarnation, the First Doctor, as a kid when he was 90 years old. However, with all this talk about aging, a Time Lord is able to age. They're just aging more slowly than a human. The War Doctor and the 11th Doctor, over the course of the Last Great Time War and the Battle of Trenzalore, respectively, are seen to age within their respective incarnations to what would appear to be a human at elderly old age.
I would even, this is a sidebar and this is just my personal opinion, but I would even, if you count the short that the 8th Doctor appears in, I would also say that the 8th Doctor definitely ages pretty significantly. And that is mostly a product of production time.
Yeah. But this is the point of this was that like these Time Lords, if given to last in their incarnation over hundreds of years,
they will age.
They will age. They will go from young to elderly. A Time Lord is able to conceal their Time Lord nature and become a human by using a device called the chameleon arc. Now, this is a device that stores their essence and memories in a device such as a fob watch or a clock. It can be any kinds of things like that, and replaces them with false counterparts until the object is later reopened. This process allows them to disguise themselves as humans, physiologically, a lot of
Physiologically.
Thank you. And psychologically, having been a Time Lord. Now, this story element has been featured in Series 3. The 10th Doctor uses it to hide from the family of blood and becomes a school teacher in England. And now also his nemesis, the Master, used it to disguise himself as a human to escape fighting in the Time War.
That's a really good 10th Doctor episode that Jason just mentioned.
But Time Lords as well also have telepathic powers. Time Lords can communicate by telepathy and can link their minds to share information and enhance their powers. In I don't know how to say this, Castrovalva, an episode of the 5th Doctor, the Doctor activates the TARDIS's Zero Room mentally. Additionally, both the Doctor and the Master demonstrate significant hypnotic abilities, which may be supplemented by their telepathic abilities. In the planet of the Ood, the 10th Doctor seems to be temporarily able to confer some degree of telepathy upon his companion Donna Noble so that she can hear the telepathic song of the Ood. When she is unable to bear the song, the Doctor removes the ability. This telepathic ability is also extended to other alien species to some extent, and in the same episode, the Doctor is able to hear the Ood's telepathic song again when the humans could not. And also, as we see in the Lodger, the 11th Doctor, pressed for time, of course, smashes his forehead into another person's forehead, causing a massive telepathic download. The Doctor has also been shown that he can contact the Time Lords by going into a trance and sort of assembling sort of a box in the episode The War Games. And in The Two Doctors, the Doctor engages in an astral projection of himself, but warns that if he's disturbed while doing so, his mind could be severed from his body and he could die.
Well, it was like the 70s, so astral plane was real tricky.
Yeah, well, get ready, there's even more. In addition, Time Lords have been shown to be sort of clairvoyant and have additional time-related senses, which sort of makes sense when you think about their species.
Yeah.
In The Time Monster and Invasion of the Dinosaurs, the 3rd Doctor is able to resist fields of slow time and being able to move through them even when humans are completely paralyzed. And in City of Death, both the 4th Doctor and Romana, I previously mentioned her before, they notice distortions and jumps in time and problems in time when no one else does. Also, in the 2005 series, when the 9th Doctor first shows up, he claims that he can sense the movement of the Earth through space, as well as being able to see and perceive the past and all possible futures at the same time.
That also reminds me of the 12th Doctor moment when him and Missy, who is a time lady, can feel the artificial gravity. And when they're trying to figure out where they are, that's how they know that they're on a space station. Now, that might not be something specific to their race. That might be just because they're used to being in space and traveling through artificial gravity. But I always thought that was interesting.
Nice. The 9th Doctor also, as well, I'm talking about, he's able to concentrate and time his motions well enough to step safely through the blades of a rapidly spinning fan. And he later claims that if the Time Lords still existed, because at that time they didn't, he would be able to sense them. In Utopia, the 10th Doctor states that he finds it very difficult to look at Captain Jack Harkness because Jack's existence has become a fixed point in time and space. Now, Captain Jack Harkness is the character played by John Barrowman from Arrow, of course, as well, and he is an immortal that has lived through like thousands and thousands of years, but he ages normally or whatever, and the Doctor, of course, would have a hard time looking at him because, he's this natural fixed point in time. He wouldn't look like a normal human would.
No, exactly.
All right. Now let's talk about a Time Lord's biggest power, regeneration.
Ooh, let's.
Now, Time Lords have the ability to regenerate their bodies when their current body is mortally wounded. The process results in their body undergoing a transformation, gaining a new physical form and a new personality, and also healing themselves. A Time Lord who was pleasant and polite in his previous generation might express surprise when his new form turns out to be an asshole and say rude things. And regenerations can be traumatic events for Time Lords, but a Time Lord, fun fact, can die before they have the chance to regenerate, in which case they die outright. It was first stated in The Deadly Assassin that a story of the Fourth Doctor and also, by the way, fun fact, The Deadly Assassin is the first Doctor Who story of all time to have no companion.
Oh, cool.
It was a Tom Baker episode, and it was the Tom Baker episode after he left Sarah Jane Smith behind.
Aw, Sarah
So
Jane.
this was the first Doctor Who episode to ever have no companion.
Which is not something that happens often, but it does happen.
Yeah. In that story, it was said that a Time Lord can regenerate for the very first time 12 times, 13 incarnations in all. There were exceptions to this rule, of course, however. When the Master reached the end of his regeneration cycle, he took possession of the body of another person to continue living. In the 5 Doctors, the Master was offered a new cycle of regenerations by the High Council of Gallifrey to save the Doctor from the death zone. So it has been shown that there are many methods to get past the 12 regeneration limit.
Yeah.
It is also confirmed in the Time of the Doctor that a Time Lord can only normally regenerate 12 times. But again, we see that the Time Lords have the ability to grant more regenerations at the behest of Clara Oswald, who granted the Doctor himself a new cycle when he is at the point of death from old age. Now, it is not clear at all whether Time Lords can recognize each other across regenerations. In the 3 Doctors, the second Doctor recognizes the third Doctor immediately, despite the fact that the third Doctor is a future incarnation of himself. Mm-hmm. And Omega, who is a grand and old Time Lord, is able to recognize the 2 Doctors as the same man. It is also worth noting that Time Lords appear to have the ability to stay conscious for moments after events that would outright kill other life forms instantly. As I said, the radiation and like getting shot and stuff like, giving them the opportunity to regenerate. In Legopolis, the 4th Doctor falls hundreds of feet to the ground, yet is still conscious and able to talk to his companions when they find him minutes later before he regenerates. And in the caves of Adrozani, the 5th Doctor remains conscious through the entire course of his fatal spectral toxemia. I don't know how to say that word. While his human companion Perry loses consciousness as the disease worsens. It has also been stated by the 12th Doctor that regeneration is like feeling like every cell of your body is exploding, and that it's painful and that it hurts, and that regeneration, when allowed to go naturally, can take a long time. And that is why Time Lords like to die amongst their own, because other species will bury Time Lords before they regenerate.
Ooh, that sucks.
Thinking that they're dead. Mm-hmm. So, all right, now let's talk a little bit about Time Lord culture. Now, the Time Lord homeworld Gallifrey is an Earth-like planet with a lot of deserts in the fictional constellation of Castabros. Its capital city is referred to as the Citadel and contains the capital, the seat of the Time Lord government. And at the center of the capital is the Panopticon, and beneath which is the Eye of Harmony, an artificial black hole created by the Time Lords to provide energy for their homeworld of Gallifrey and provide all the energy for their time travel technology. Outside the capital lie wastelands where the outsiders are Time Lords who have dropped out of Time Lord society and live in less technological advanced communities, shunning life in the cities. The outsiders have often been equated with the Shobogans, a group mentioned briefly in the Deadly Assassin episode, as being responsible for acts of vandalism around the Panopticon. And there's usually nothing on screen that kind of connects those two groups, but like since they both live outside the Citadel, everybody kind of thinks they're the same group.
Yeah, just different names.
So it's interesting. Again, basically, if you don't live in one of the cities, you're considered you're below us. It is implied in the Invasion of Time and the Deadly Assassin episodes that the terms Gallifreyan and Time Lord may not be synonymous, and that Time Lords are simply the subset of Gallifreyans who have achieved the status of Time Lord via the achievement in the Gallifreyan collegiate system. In the episode The Sound of Drums, the Doctor talks of children of Gallifrey, which implies that children are Gallifreyan before they are Time Lords. And basically, in general, the Time Lords are kind of an aloof people. They are a society full of pomp and ceremony, and the Doctor has observed that his people enjoy making speeches, and they have an infinite capacity for pretension.
I would hazard that when one considers the fact that this is created by a bunch of English people, it's not surprising that might be the way you would hold up a race that is both or a subsect of a race that is both powerful but perhaps annoying.
Well, the Sixth Doctor also characterized the Time Lords as stagnant and a corrupt society, a state caused by 10 million years of absolute power over the galaxy. Now, children of Gallifrey are taken from their families at the age of 8 and admitted into the academy. Novices then are taken to the initiation ceremony before the untempered schism, which is a gap in the fabric of reality that looks like a time vortex, or basically lets you see the time vortex pure. Of those that stare into it, some are inspired, some run away, and others go mad. The Doctor suggested that the Master went mad, while he admitted that that's the reason why he ran away from Gallifrey. Now, details of the Time Lord's history within the show are sketchy. I'll have a little bit of a timeline later on. We're going to talk about this a little bit. And a lot of it is full of supposition and contradiction. Now, basically, the history of the Time Lords is this. The Time Lords became the masters of time travel when their number one scientist, called Omega, created an energy source to power their experiments through time. To this end, Omega used a stellar manipulation device called the Hand of Omega to rework a nearby star into a new form to serve the source. Unfortunately, that star flared, went into a supernova, and collapsed into a black hole. Now, Omega was thought killed in that explosion, but unknown to everyone, he somehow survived in an antimatter universe beyond the black hole singularity. And he would come back to, of course, vex the Doctor. Now, Rassilon is the ultimate founder of Time Lord Society. He took a singularity. Now, some fans have assumed this singularity to be the same singularity that Omega created. Never been confirmed. Rassilon took a singularity, placed it beneath the Time Lord Citadel on Gallifrey, and perfectly balanced the Eye of Harmony to serve as the power source for civilization and their time machines.
Nice.
Now, this is why Rassilon is the most revered figure in Time Lord society. Rassilon's name is used frequently throughout Time Lord culture and legend and is applied to many artifacts of power. Rassilon, of course, like I said, he balanced the Eye of Harmony. But even though all this stuff was happening, an early part of Time Lord history is known as the Dark Time.
Hey, we all have that.
Yeah, this is when the first Time Lords abused their powers of time by manipulating lesser species. Among these abuses is the use of the time scoop to abduct beings from throughout history to participate in gladiatorial games. With the exception of such races as the Daleks and the Cybermen, who are never allowed to be in these games because they play the game too well and are too dangerous to be used. Now, but the Time Lords would just sit and watch these species fight in an area of Gallifrey known as the Death Zone. Now, during his rule, Rassilon leads the Time Lords in a war against, who do you think, Ashley?
The Daleks.
Incorrect. Vampires.
Great.
They were called the Great Vampires. And it was a war so horrific that this made Time Lord society basically forswear violence from that point on, which is a tenet that the Doctor kind of follows pretty hardcore. Eventually, Rassilon dies or is disposed. There are actually contradictory legends around his demise, and his body is placed in the Dark Tower in the Death Zone, which becomes known as the Tomb of Rassilon. And over 4.6 billion years prior to the current day, the Time Lords wipe out the Rachnos, and the surviving Rachnos escape in their ship, which drifts into a solar system and eventually forms the core of the planet Earth.
Interesting.
So if you don't know, we're descended from an alien race called the Rachnos. At some point in their history, the Time Lords then interacted with the civilization known as the Minyos, giving them advanced technology, including the ability to regenerate to a limited degree by rejuvenating their bodies when they grow too old. This was met with disastrous results. And this is said by some Time Lords to be the reason why Time Lords have a philosophy of non-interference. Now, the Minions destroyed themselves with this technology in a series of nuclear wars. And then the last great Time War happened.
The last great one.
Yes. Now, the last great Time War pitted the Time Lords of Gallifrey against the Daleks of Skaro. This is what the Ninth Doctor talks about, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. The specific incident that sparked the conflict remains unclear, but according to executive producer Russell T. Davies, the origins dated back to the conflicts between the Doctor and the Daleks. In Genesis of the Daleks in 1975, the Time Lords, having foreseen the possibility of the Daleks conquering the universe, send the Fourth Doctor into the past to attempt to avert the Daleks' creation and affect their development to make them less aggressive or discover an inherent weakness that they could exploit. In retaliation for this ultimately unsuccessful mission, and by the way, Genesis of the Daleks is a great episode, the Daleks attempt to infiltrate the High Council of the Time Lords with duplicates of the Fifth Doctor and Resurrection of the Daleks, followed then by an open declaration of hostilities by one of the Dalek emperors in remembrance of the Daleks. Now, two specific events led up to the outbreak of the war. A peace treaty was attempted by President Romana. Remember her? Mm-hmm. She gets a promotion under the Act of Master Restitution. This attempt was followed by the Etra Prime incident, which some say began the escalation of events. Weapons were used by the Time Lords, including bow ships, black hole carriers, and informs, while the Daleks wielded the full might of the Deathsmiths of Goth, which is from a comic strip story, actually, from the Black Legacy by Alan Moore. And they, of course, launched a massive fleet led by the Emperor into the vortex. Now, the duration and the extent of the war remains unclear. It's a time war, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a statement once made by Jack Harkness in The Parting of Ways that was confirmed by the Doctor that after the Great Time War, the Daleks vanished out of time and space to fight the war, indicating that this war was not fought in our sense of normal space-time. Now, the Doctor claimed to have fought on the front lines and he was present at the fall of the Gallifreyan city Arcadia. Now, Arcadia was Gallifrey's second city that was fortified with 400 sky trenches, and these were thought to be impregnable until an invading Dalek squadron sent them away. And we saw this in the 2013 minisode called The Last Day.
Yeah.
Now, in the 2013 minisode, The Night of the Doctor, it reveals that at first the Doctor, which at this point was the 8th Doctor, Paul McGann,
yes,
he refused to take part in the Great Time War, even though it spiraled out of control and threatened to destroy the universe, instead trying to help out where he could. But eventually he regenerated, and the Doctor accepted the Time War, remarking that there was no need for a Doctor and a universe consumed by war. And he requested that the Sisterhood of Karn make him a warrior. He drank their elixir, regenerated into the War Doctor, and declared himself a Doctor no more. And on the last day of the Time War, the Dalek fleet surrounded Gallifrey and launched what was said to have been the biggest attack on the planet. 10 million Dalek ships subjected Gallifrey to a massive orbital bombardment and destroyed numerous Daleks to invade the surface. Upon learning of Rassilon's ultimate sanction, which is something we see in the final episode of David Tennant, the War Doctor stole an ancient Gallifreyan weapon known as the Moment, or the Galaxy Eater, and intended to reduce Gallifrey into rocks and dust, with the Inferno wiping out the Dalek fleet. He was going to destroy both sides. And interestingly enough, this entire period of war had become time-locked so that no time traveler could enter or exit out of it. But the Moment had a will of its own and showed the War Doctor an alternate solution, and ultimately enabled all incarnations of the Doctor to gather to save Gallifrey by freezing it in time and removing it from the known universe. The sudden disappearance of Gallifrey led to the Daleks firing upon themselves, ultimately annihilating themselves, and while the Time Lords remained powerless and forgotten in another dimension.
Do you think going forward that every time we meet a new Doctor, they're going to have to retcon how they appeared during that scene?
No, because I think you're just going to be a thing of, well, yeah, because we didn't, or you just go with there were only 13 Doctors at that time.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. We could only handle 13 Doctors. I don't know. As the War Doctor's regeneration into the Ninth Doctor wiped out the memory of him saving Gallifrey as a means for the timeline to correct itself, the Doctor was haunted with the false knowledge of his home planet's demise. Now, the timeline of other races and planets shifted without the inhabitants of the worlds being aware of the changes in history because of the Great Time War. The most affected were the Greater Animus, which died, the Zygons, who lost their home world and attempted to conquer Earth because of it, the Eternals, who apparently fled reality in despair, and the Gelth, who lost their physical form and were reduced to gaseous beings who attempted to possess human corpses using the Time Ref in Cardiff because of the Great Time War. Now, real quick note about the Time War.
Okay.
That I think is funny.
Okay.
The Time War, of course, provides a convenient in-story explanation for any contradictions in series continuity.
Yes.
For example, writer Paul Cornell has suggested that Earth's destruction by expanding the sun in the end of the war 5 billion years hence, as opposed to the original depiction as its original demise in the year 10 million AD in the Ark, which was an episode in 1966, can be attributed to changes in history due to the last Great Time War. And Stephen Moffat, who is the current executive producer for Doctor Who, has gone even further, arguing that a television series which embraces the ideas of parallel universes and the concept of changing time can never have a continuity error. It's impossible for Doctor Who to get it wrong because we can just say he changed time or it's a ripple from the Time War.
I don't know if he's wholly wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't like that.
Yeah. I just actually thought it was a very convenient way because Doctor Who does have a lot of continuity gaffes.
It has, you could drive buses through some of the plot holes.
But it's an interesting thing too, where you think that maybe that's what Russell T Davies intended when he put the Great Time War as the bridge between the two series to basically be like, look, if our series doesn't match up to the original one, Time War.
Yeah, if you want to give him that credit, that's fine. I just think it was a really convenient way to be like, this is why there's been no episodes for 20 years, guys. They done had a war.
Yeah. All right. And finally, in the episode called Hellbent, Gallifrey is revealed to have come back from the pocket universe it was frozen in, and it now exists at the end of the universe, so several billion years in our future. Rassilon is revealed to have been the one who had the Doctor teleported into the confession dial in that same very episode, and the Doctor forces Rassilon to leave Gallifrey.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically it for the Time Lords.
Whew.
But before we get into recommended reading, I have an announcement.
Okay.
Ashley.
Jason.
We have a brand new website.
What?
Yeah, that's right. We have a brand new website. We have a brand new logo. It's prettier, and you can go over there and look. It's the same link. It's at geekhistorylesson.com. Please go on over there and look. It's much simpler. All our social media is on there. A link to our Patreon is on there. And also, if you look at the episodes on the first page, we're going to sometimes put our Meet Cute, links to our Meet Cute. So pictures that we talk about, videos we talk about, we'll have links there. You can go check them out only at geekhistorylesson.com. And also check out our new logo.
Yeah.
It's pretty sweet. It's really cool. It's made by the amazing Gene Shaw, friend of the show. And by the way, we got a t-shirt with that new logo out.
Do we really?
We got a new t-shirt, but you should go over to geekhistorylesson.com, click on our merch link, and if you head on there, if you hear this early enough, when we put it on our website, sometimes it has a discount. But only if you get there very quickly, so it'll be cheaper than the rest. You want to be cool. You want to show everybody your really sweet new Geek History Lesson t-shirt. Go check out the new geekhistorylesson.com.
Nice.
All right, so let's move on to recommended reading.
Yes, where Professor Jason is going to recommend a bunch of stuff that you can read and check out in case you felt like you needed more about the Time Lords. And you can find all of these always at geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading. And go click the Amazon widget, go pick up something that you think is cool, and a little bit of support comes back our way and helps us stave off a future time war.
Yeah, and just to let you know, that link is still the same.
Yes.
Nothing changed because of that. All right. First off is Doctor Who, the official guide on how to be a Time Lord. Now, this is a funny little book that was written by the ancient Time Lords, but it has been improved / sabotaged by the 11th Doctor as a gift to the 12th Doctor.
Aww.
So it's kind of like a little funny book, and I also like
That's
the
cute.
little guides that are like in-universe guides. I think they're fun. Next is Doctor Who, the Whoniverse, The Untold History of Space and Time. Now, this is a full-color book with maps, charts, artifacts, and it is like kind of an essential companion to like everything in Doctor Who's history. And they have a really cool like pull out on Gallifrey. So if you want to figure out where Gallifrey is in the universe, and also even funnier, they have the full and they claimed never before seen full history of the human race.
Oh, good.
In that book, which I think we need. And then also, lastly, I'm going to recommend a comic book for some fun. Doctor Who, The Four Doctors. Now, this is written by Paul Cornell, who wrote the excellent episode where the 10th Doctor gets trapped, turns human, and his Gallifreyan goes into that fob watch. Talked about it a little bit. He's also a comic book writer. The Four Doctors is where the 12th 11th, and 10th Doctor all go on an adventure, and the War Doctor shows up too.
That's cool.
And it's pretty cool. It's really neat to see the 12th Doctor interact with 11 and 10 because he's not big fans of them.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, but that's a little fun book, so go on over there and pick it up. And now we're going to move into discussion, but we're not going to leave the discussion all by ourselves. We're going to call in what I'm going to call a Time Lord expert. That is right. We are pulling in Matthew Peterson straight from the Major Spoilers podcast and the Legion Clubhouse podcast to ask him some questions about the Time Lords. Hey, Matthew, welcome back to Geek History Lesson.
Oh, thanks for having me. I always enjoy being on the Geek thing. It makes me feel like I'm old.
And smart?
That too.
Okay, so we've been breaking down everything about Gallifrey and the Time Lords. You are a long time Doctor Who fan. I have to ask you, do you like the Time Lords?
They can be fun. Like everything relating to the Doctor's nature, the Time Lords are actually, they were basically created as a cheat because, Regeneration actually came about because Bill Hartnell was ill and couldn't keep playing the role. So they rejuvenated him. They actually called it, I think, renewal in the episode. And a new actor came in and took his place. The Time Lords first showed up in the second Doctor's last story, the War Games. And the Time Lords were basically introduced, and it's like, oh my God, the Doctor's this alien, and he has these alien overlords. And they're like, well, we're going to force you to regenerate again because, Patrick Troughton was leaving the show, and he wasn't ill, and there was no reason for, the standard renewal that we had seen all at one time. So when used correctly, like in that instance, when they showed up and forced that change of status quo that became the first part of that third Doctor era, I think they're great. I will say that I do love the fact that the Time Lords are responsible for 3 of the greatest, not necessarily best, but greatest stories in the history of Doctor Who.
Interesting. What are those stories?
The 3 Doctors in, I want to say 76, where the Time Lords under President Rassilon actually break the rules, the laws of time, and gather the 3 Doctors, or 2.5 Doctors, together to let them fight Omega, who is actually a Time Lord gone bad. A few years later, in the 5 Doctors, once again, Rassilon has gone bad this time. The 5 Doctors, or in this case 4.5 Doctors, are pulled out of the time stream, breaking the laws of time again, working together to take down Rassilon himself. And then Rassilon once again returns in the modern Who era when the 10th Doctor is fighting against and I can't even remember the name of it now, but fighting against Rassilon is played by the 4th James Bond. Because, you regenerate. Yeah, you regenerate, your face changes. And sometimes you use the same face over and again. But that story was just amazing until it ended. And as with everything, it ended terribly. But it had a lot of John Sims as the 5th Master. So I kind of loved it, too.
Now, I do want to ask, did you like it when the Time Lords went away during the modern series?
Yes. And that's the thing that's really great about modern Doctor Who is they've made so many changes that seem minor, that seem, inconsequential. But the change of the Doctor is on the run from his people and he's this weird Lord guy, as opposed to the modern era, especially the 9th Doctor, as this sort of lone, crazy alien who's above it all, really changes everything. The 10th Doctor actually says at one point, when the Time Lords were around, you could do what you want. You could go from universe to universe. You could pop into another time stream. It was fine. No problem. We can't do that anymore. And that really makes big changes to the series. And we see that with the 9th Doctor in Father's Day when he and Rose destroy the universe accidentally. We see it with the 10th Doctor when he runs around, and especially in the waters of Mars, where he's like, you know what, I'm not playing by the rules anymore, and he's just as crazy and dangerous as the Master ever was. So, yeah, I feel like it was a wise decision to pull them back. And I feel like the way that they did come back and the time that they came back was perfect as well.
Well, you like the idea that
Because-
they're at the end of the universe now.
Yes. And I like the way that, and it's the end of the 12th Doctor's era. The 11th Doctor, because you count funny. So when we got to the end of Matt Smith's run, the 11th Doctor has run out of lives. And then we realize, and he reveals, not only was there a secret life you didn't know about, that nobody knew about, that 10th regeneration that I did 4 seasons ago actually counts. So I'm all out of lives. And then they brought them back at that point, because it was, very importantly, it was a Time Lord story that first revealed the 12 revelation, or the 12 lives thing. That's from the Deadly Assassin, which is a 4th Doctor story where he goes back to Gallifrey and has to deal with, strangely enough, Rassilon. So that 12 regenerations thing was kind of just, let's throw this out. Ha ha, it's a funny joke. And then 40 years later, somebody came up with a way to get around that. And it worked not only just as a story that was neat, but it worked for, the jerks who'd been around since the Deadly Assassin to go, what about the 12 regenerations, guys? What do we do now? So that was fun.
Let me ask you this. Do you ever foresee a time where in the modern series, maybe a couple seasons down the road, maybe it's this new season, that the Doctor would maybe cross paths with the Time Lords more? Or do you think that now that we're in this new modern series, we should just stay away from the Time Lords as much as possible? Like, do you think that maybe in a new season we could see the Time Lords, every 4 episodes?
It'd be interesting. I don't know what the new season has in mind and the possibility of, 13 on the horizon. I will never say never, because when they brought back Doctor Who, I was irritated at having a romance at the core of the story. And then that worked for me. And then the 9th Doctor did his thing at the Parting of the Ways, and I'm like, oh my God. And then the 10th Doctor and Rose had their thing. And then I was less happy with it when Martha showed up and she's totally into him. And then they just went, okay, no romance. Let's just have the season with Donna. So every time they bring in something that my brain says this is going to suck, they have more often than not done interesting things with it. I don't know. I feel like it's all in the execution. And I feel like modern Doctor Who audiences may not know that they might want to see that, because they're used to the Doctor who's kind of a one-man loose cannon wrecking crew. So it could happen.
Who is your favorite Time Lord besides the Doctor? There's a few that we know about.
My favorite in any and every incarnation is the Master. And that's weird, because if you actually listen to my other shows, I'm the guy who hates the whole Venom is a dark Spider-Man and this guy is a dark Batman and everybody has to have their dark mirror. But the Master, especially when it was the original, well, not the original, but the Roger Delgado Master and the 3rd Doctor going head to head, it was perfect because they were friends, they were colleagues, they were peers. It was very important that the 3rd Doctor treated the Master as a peer. This was someone that was on his level. One of the few creatures that he actually felt is just as intelligent as he is. And then he's also crazy and evil. And the more they used him, the better that got, until it stopped being good. And then for a while in the 5 Doctors, he was just standing in the death zone, being a zombie. But I think that when you get into that modern thing with John Sim, the guy that I like to call Life on Mars, as the new Master, and I'm one of the people who everybody tells me, I don't like the new Master as a woman. I'm like, Missy is awesome. Missy is awesome, because for the first time they have this thing where you're like, they're flirting. Oh my God, they've always been flirting. Oh my God, they've always been flirting, you guys. And I really love that, just that balance, taking the same relationship, but having a female Master somehow makes the whole thing even more disturbing 40 years backwards, which I think is kind of wonderful.
Well, let me ask you this. We've seen, as the final question, we've seen the Doctor become president of the Time Lords before. Do you think he'll ever win a future election?
No, he won't, because he will never be there. This is the thing. He gets elected president, and then he says, yes, someone, take some dictation, and then he gets in the TARDIS and he runs. At the end of the 5 doctors, the 5th doctor is like, oh, I'm the president now. Great. Bring me my ship. And he doesn't return for 400 years. It's kind of neat.
Nice. And since I have you on here, I said that was the final question, but I lied. All right, we're staring at the 13th Doctor coming down the pike. That Regeneration is coming very, very soon at the end of this year. Now, does it worry you as a classic Doctor fan that so far in the modern series, with the exception of David Tennant, if you count his season where it was all the movies, that it seems like every 3 seasons we're going to get a new Doctor? Whereas like back in the day, you know, we had Tom Baker stick around for like 7 years. Like, does it worry you that maybe over the next 10 years of Doctor Who, we're going to have like 6 new Doctors or 3 new Doctors or 4 new Doctors? You know, we're going to speed up the regenerations.
It doesn't necessarily worry me for 2 reasons. One, if you, and I did the math on this at one point, if you discount the 8th Doctor, who appeared twice 27 years apart or something, your average tenure for a Doctor is about 3.5 years, because the 1st Doctor did 3, 2nd Doctor did 4, sort of, 3rd Doctor did 4, sort of. You get to a point where even with the 5th and the 6th and the 7th, you are getting about 3 seasons, or the equivalent of 3 seasons out of a Doctor. So I don't like it, but it doesn't necessarily worry me, because really in a modern context, you have your long runner shows do need some sort of reinvention every couple of 3 seasons, or else you get that, 8th season of Cheers problem. Or, I don't know if you guys remember that season of Community they did without Dan Harmon. I don't want that for my Doctor Who. So what it really comes down to for me is if it means a Doctor who's able to actually commit to the role, be excited about the role, with a showrunner who really wants to do something, I'd rather see change than someone, trying to break Baker's record and giving us a whole lot of, trash episodes.
I understand that. It's funny because I thought Capaldi was that guy. I was like, he's a lifelong Doctor Who fan, and I was kind of like, he's going to be the guy that break Baker's record.
I had some hopes too, but I honestly, I don't pretend to read anybody's mind, but I think the change of showrunner is kind of a point where you do want a new Doctor. And I can understand him wanting to take this opportunity to leave and let that new showrunner have a brand new Doctor. Because if you actually look at the arc of the 12th Doctor, there are a couple of points where it feels like there's starts and stops, and we just did this and now we're doing it again. And why is Danny Pink in this season? Why does he exist? What?
Everybody asks that question, I think,
all the time.
What's his deal? Why is he even here? Oh, now he's a Cyberman. That's just silly. I don't even know what that means, man.
All right, Matthew. Well, thank you so much for talking to us about some Time Lords. Let all the children of Gallifrey out there know where they can find you on the internet.
You can find me at Mighty King Cobra on the Twitter, probably the same handle on the Tumblrator, because I don't know where that is. And you can always go to majorspoilers.com and click on any podcast at random, and there's a 6 in 10 chance that I'm going to be on it.
Nice. Well, thanks for talking to us today, man.
No problem.
And thanks for coming on the show, Matthew. That was very illuminating, or should I say timey-wimey?
Really timey-wimey.
Yeah, it was really timey-wimey. That was a fun little conversation with Matthew. Go follow him on Twitter. Do all that stuff. All right, let's move into the last section of our podcast, the Teaching Tweet.
Where in 140 characters or less, Professor Jason is going to sum up everything he just taught us about the Time Lords.
And you can find this tweet at GHL Podcast on Twitter.
True.
Here we go. Time Lords. They tell the Doctor what to do in his timey-wimey. I don't know why he ever bothered to save them. Gallifrey, All right, that's it for this lesson of Geek History Lesson on the Time Lords. If you never watched Doctor Who, please go do it. But before you go do that, head on over to iTunes, SoundCloud, and Audio Boom, and make sure you click subscribe on our podcast, guys. And when you're over there, make sure you leave us a review on iTunes, because if you do that, it helps people find the show. And also, we're going to read them on the show, like this one from Jose Riviera 83. He said, I discovered the podcast through the episodes on YouTube. We're grateful to find them there, and even more episodes on iTunes. So I hit subscribe, and I love it. Jason and Ashley do an amazing job covering a wide array of history and continuity while making it fun. Whether I know the characters being discussed or it's something I'm not familiar with, I know I'll discover something new that I would never have thought of before. And even better, with a wealth of episodes to choose from, I listen to them when I need cheering up the most at work. Highly recommend, and nothing but praise for the hosts. Keep up the amazing work. Jose, I'm so glad we can make your workday better, man.
Thank you so much, Jose. And I love it when people can take us to work with them because I listen to podcasts at work. So it's nice to be able to do the same thing for other people.
Hey, everyone that's listening to this podcast right now and you're at work, take a look at your boss. Yeah, you see him? Him or her. Could be her. Take a look at your boss of an unspecified gender. See him? Do you see him? You making eye contact with him? All right. Now think in your mind right now, because you'll know this, but they won't know. Screw your boss. Yeah, that's right. You don't need that person. You're better than that person.
They might like their boss.
Okay, if you like your boss, yeah, they're awesome. Okay, cool. You decide which one of these versions you want to listen to. Okay, there you go. Well, I hope that helps your workday. All right. But, something that helps our workday, of course, is always going over and supporting everything we do, whether that is buying the t-shirt at geekhistorylesson.com or going to patreon.com/Jawiin. And you want to go over there because there's lots of cool stuff over there, including Geek History Lesson Extra,
which
is a whole extra podcast. And this episode's going to be classic episodes of Doctor Who that everyone should watch. We're going to pick more of Matthew's brain and be like, hey, man, what are some classic episodes of Doctor Who that you think everyone should watch? And then, Ashley, where can they suggest future episodes of the podcast?
You can suggest future episodes of the podcast at geekhistorylesson.com. New and improved. Please go check it out. Facebook.com/geekhistorylesson and on Twitter at GHL Podcast. There's a bunch of different ways to get in contact with us in all of those places.
You can find me on Twitter at Jawiin, Jawiin. Find Ashley on Twitter at Ashley V. Robinson. And go follow Geek History Lesson, GHL Podcast.com. All right, that is it. I am Jason, has a long scarf Inman.
I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson, and Professor Jason, would you please take us away?
Timey-wimey, time to end.